Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Once again, welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining. We are continuing with chapter number 12 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti means devotion. So it's yoga teaching us how to perform devotional service to the Supreme Lord. We concluded at verse number 7 last week. So we'll continue with verse number 8 in Sanskrit. Mayeva mana adhatsva mai buddhim niveshaya nivashyasya mai eva ata urtvam na samshayah. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus, you will live in me always without a doubt. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Chalakaya Chakshur Unmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Very happy to have you all today in this session. So today's topic is symptoms of one who is very dear to Krishna. So as we go through these verses, we will understand how we can become dear to Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's giving us a formula now. First of all, he says, fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Lord. So he's declaring that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and that we need to fix our mind upon him. Now, the million-dollar question is how to fix the mind on the Supreme Lord. It's very simple. In this age that we are living in, which is called the Kali Yuga, the best, the simplest, the easiest, the quickest method to fix our mind on Krishna is by chanting his holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And then he says, engage all your intelligence in me. Now, how do we engage our intelligence in Krishna? In chapter 10, we learned, Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam Dadami Buddhi Yogam. Buddhi means intelligence. So Krishna says, he's not talking about our material intelligence, by which the intelligence we use to get, academic degrees or whatever. No, he's talking about the spiritual side. And that intelligence, even this material intelligence, it comes from Krishna. It comes from the Supreme Lord. So he says, those who worship me with love and devotion, to them I give them the intelligence by which they can know me. So if we want to engage our intelligence in Krishna, then the best process is to worship him with love and devotion. And that is very easily accomplished by just chanting the holy names. Harirnam, 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 eva kevalam. Kalo nasteva, nasteva, nastev, gati anyatha. It is said in the scriptures that in this age of Kali Yuga, there is no other way, no other way, no other way except chanting, chanting, chanting. That is why in all my classes, I talk quite a bit about this chanting because it's a very simple method of fixing our mind on Krishna, engaging our intelligence in him. And then what is the result? The result is Krishna says, you will always live in me without doubt, which means our consciousness will become purified. It'll become Krishna conscious, which means we become conscious of the Supreme Lord. And the first step would be to fix our mind on him. And the best way to fix is by performing devotional service. Now, in the Vedas, there are 9 processes given for devotional service, there are 9 processes. And it starts with Shravanam. Shravanam means hearing. Kirtanam, which means remembering, singing, chanting, and then Smaranam, which is remembering. So if we hear the Bhagavad Gita, and then if we chant the holy name, the Maha Mantra, do that mantra meditation, then that will lead us to Smaranam, which is remembrance of the Supreme Lord. And Srila Prabhupada explains that when we perform this devotional service for Krishna, then it becomes a direct relationship with him, like we are connecting with him. Now, just like if I want to connect with my son, what do? I pick up my phone and I give him a call. This is how I make that connection. So similarly, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. This is the telephone number by which we can connect to Krishna. That is how we can build a relationship. And this is a transcendental position. It is not anything material. When Krishna says perform devotional service, he's also indicating that we need to follow the instructions. Just like when I buy a new car, and it's not the type that I have, used before. Along with the car will come the owner's manual, which is going to tell me what kind of gas I need to use. Is it diesel, or is it regular gas, or is it premium? And it's going to explain all the different parts, and it'll explain how to use the car. Right? So similarly, this human form of body is also like a car. It's a machine. It's taking us from point A to point B. Now, this body, which is a material machine, also has an owner's manual how to use this machine, this body. And that owner's manual is the Bhagavad Gita that we are discussing on every Wednesday. So Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, Satatam kirtayanto mam. Yatantascha dhrida vritaha. Dhrida means with determination, with firm faith. What we need to do, Satatam means always. Kirtayanto means chanting. Mam means unto me. So Krishna is saying, always chant my holy names. That is how we'll be able to purify our senses, purify our mind, purify our intelligence, in fact, our whole existence. And then we will really understand what is the purpose of human life. It is not just for eat, sleep, and be merry. No. Many times people say, oh, the goal of life is eat, then you sleep. Then you wake up and then you eat. Then you sleep, then you wake up and then you eat and then you sleep. This is animal life. This is not human life at all. Human life, we have that philosophical intelligence by which we can figure out, take on knowledge and understand what is right and what is wrong. And when I keep insisting, like Krishna keeps insisting in the Bhagavad Gita, chant, 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 because when we chant, we sharpen our intelligence, and that is what helps us in progressing in our spiritual life. Now, there is no difference. Krishna says between me and my holy name, it's the same. There is no difference between Krishna and his holy name. So when we chant his holy name, Krishna is present. Chanting is like associating with the Supreme Lord. It is a transcendental spiritual plane. It has nothing to do with material. But to be able to do that, we also need to follow some rules. The rules are, of course, chanting every day, following regulative principles, offering our food to the Lord so that we don't eat anything sinful, because every action has a reaction. So this is how the process is given to us in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the best part is of this chapter is for lazy people like us. In Kali Yuga, most people are lazy. So Krishna knows that. So he's given us options, right? If you cannot do this, then you do that. So now he starts giving us options. First, he said, fix your mind upon me. If he says, if you cannot fix your mind, then you just follow the regulative principles. Once you start following the regulative principles, then Krishna says we will develop a desire to attain him. Now, what are these four regulative principles? It's given in the scriptures, in the Vedas. The four principles, actually, just like the house in which we stay, is, of course, has a very strong foundation, but it also has, the pillars on which it is holding on to. The pillars are necessary. Once the pillars are removed from the house is going to collapse. So similarly, in spiritual life also, we have four pillars that hold on to our spiritual house. And what are those four pillars? Mercy, honesty, cleanliness, and austerity. These are the four spiritual pillars. Now, how do we make these pillars strong? Very simple. The scriptures explain to us that if we want to make these pillars strong, say for instance, the spiritual pillar of mercy, we can make it very strong if we follow one regulative principle, which is no meat eating, no meat, fish, eggs, no, just eat vegetarian food. So because if we eat non-vegetarian food, how can we develop mercy? Because we have to have mercy even on the animals. So for us to have a strong pillar called the mercy, then we must follow one regulative principle, which is no meat eating, which also includes fish, chicken, eggs, everything. Now, the second pillar, spiritual pillar, is called honesty. And that relates to the second regulative principle, which is no gambling. Because in gambling, generally people have to lie, you have to cheat to be able to win. So the second regulative principle is no gambling. If we do not gamble, then we will become honest, and our spiritual pillar called honesty will be very strong. The third spiritual pillar is austerity. When we come to 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is going to talk about austerities, austerity of speech, austerity of mind, austerity of the body. All that we will learn in 18th chapter. But right now, we are learning about the third spiritual pillar, which is austerity. Now, how do we make that strong? If we follow the third regulative principle, which is no intoxication. Because when a person takes intoxication, there is no way a person can perform austerity. That's not practical at all. Now, intoxication also includes, pardon me for saying this, but it also includes tea and coffee, because there's caffeine in it. So when we drink tea and coffee, even in that minute quantity, when we take that caffeine, then it becomes very hard for us to perform austerity. And Krishna will tell us in 18th chapter, austerity is necessary for spiritual progress. So that is the third regulative principle. Now we come to the fourth regulative principle. But before that, let's talk about the fourth spiritual pillar. And that fourth spiritual pillar is cleanliness. You see, you all must have heard that saying, cleanliness is next to godliness, right? So if we really want to be close to God, cleanliness is a requirement. It is a must. So if we want to keep that spiritual pillar strong of cleanliness, then we need to follow the fourth regulative principle, which is no illicit sex. So these are the four regulative principles: no meat eating, fish, eggs, chicken, whatever, no intoxication, no gambling, and no illicit sex. So here Krishna is saying that if you're not able to fix your mind upon me, then just follow the four regulative principles. What will happen? Because then right now we may not be attached to Krishna, right? So we have to start somewhere. So if first step is fixing the mind, now that's not being practical. So then we follow the four regulative principles. So Krishna says in this chapter that once we start following the regulative principles, then gradually we'll get elevated. and then gradually will get attached to Krishna, the Supreme Lord. That is the purpose of Bhakti Yoga. This chapter, Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, is actually helping us to purify our senses. You see, we must have noticed it's not easy to control the senses. I mean, they're like wild horses running everywhere. The eyes want to see something, the ears want to hear something, the nose want to smell something, the skin wants to touch something. It's all these senses. It's very difficult to control. And the most difficult of all senses to control is the tongue. I don't know if you all have noticed that whenever a person gets angry, the tongue works so quickly, fatafat, when we call it, quickly in anger, we start saying things that we don't mean and we hurt the other person. You see, that is no control over the tongue. So the tongue can be controlled in two ways. The one way is to chant, to use the tongue to chant the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And the second is to eat only sanctified food, which is prasadam, which is food which is first offered to the Supreme Lord. Because when even vegetables have life, vegetarian food, if we just consume it without offering, we are eating sin, because we have killed life. And the plants, the vegetables, they all have life. So we need to offer that food first to the Lord so that he can take away the sinful reactions, and he gives us only his mercy, his sanctified food that is going to help us to purify our senses. It is said that this sanctified food, which is called prasadam, is so potent, it's so powerful, that it even purifies the finer brain tissues. It not only purifies the body and the senses and the mind and the intelligence, but also the finer brain tissues, which is very necessary for us to understand the Bhagavad Gita. So when we practice Bhakti Yoga, then the senses start getting purified. So it is a process. It's a process, simple process. Step by step, if we follow this process, then we will reach our goal, our destination. Now, to be able to practice regulative principles, training is required. And training can come only when there is expert guidance. Just like in any aspect of life, we need a teacher, whether it is in school, in college, whether we are learning music, dancing, whatever activity it may be, we definitely need a bona fide teacher. So also, to really be able to put these regulative principles into action, into our lives, we definitely need a guru, a teacher who's called a guru. So there are two kinds of gurus. One is Shiksha Guru, and the other is Diksha Guru. Shiksha Guru is one who gives knowledge, and Diksha Guru is one who gives knowledge and also initiates us, connects us to Krishna. So this is how we follow this process given in the Bhagavad Gita, rising up early in the morning, chanting the holy names of the Lord, following the four regulative principles. So Krishna says when we start doing this, it will help us to start coming to a platform where we can start building a loving relationship with the Supreme Lord Krishna. Now, Krishna gives one more option. He says, fix your mind. If you cannot, then follow the four regulative principles. If you cannot do that, he says, then just work for me. This is what we learned in chapter 3 and 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, talks about karma yoga, which actually means akarma. So there are three kinds. There is karma, akarma, and vikarma. This is what we covered in chapter 3 and 5. So here Krishna wants Arjuna to do akarma, which means follow the scriptures, do as it is given in the scriptures, but do not desire to enjoy the fruits of your activities. Give up the desire for fruits. So he's saying, you work for me. Like, for instance, we go to our jobs or business or whatever it may be, go with the consciousness that I'm going to do this work for the pleasure of Krishna. This is what he says. He says, what will be the result? Then he says, one will be able to come to a perfect stage when one starts working for Krishna. Now he says, if one is not able to follow the regulative principles of bhakti yoga, one can still come to the perfect state just by working for Krishna. And one of the aspects also he talks about is to be friendly to every living entity. Not just to human beings, not just to our parents, not just to our family or friends or relatives. No, friendly to every living entity. Now, the big question is, how can we be friendly? Should we just walk on the road and start shaking hands? Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? How can I help? Can we do that? That people will think we are crazy. Who has the time to do that? But one way to be friendly, actually be friendly to another living entity, would be to give this knowledge. Invite your friends to come and hear the Bhagavad Gita, because once they hear the Bhagavad Gita, and if they put it into practice, their life will be sublime. They will attain peace and happiness. So this is a friendly gesture. I know it's not everybody who is interested in hearing Bhagavad Gita. Not everybody is interested in Bhakti Yoga, but at least we can try. We can invite our friends. Please come, hear the Bhagavad Gita. Yes, we have to take that risk. I'm pretty sure most will say, no, we don't have the time. It's okay. But we take that risk and we still invite them. At least we would have tried. And this is what pleases the Supreme Lord very much. In the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, one who spreads my holy name, one who talks about my Bhagavad Gita to others is very dear to me. You see? So, people generally in this material world, they are so engrossed in enjoying the senses. But at least we can help them understand the real purpose of human life. And that's a spiritual activity. And that satisfies Krishna a lot. And this will help one to go to a higher state of love for Krishna. Now, if Krishna then gives another option, because there are many lazy people in this world. So he has to keep giving options, fix your mind, nah. Follow regulative principles, nah. Work for me, nah. Then what? Then Krishna says, okay, if you cannot work for me, then at least give up the results of your work. Be self-satisfied. There will be impediments. It's not very easy. No one likes to go to work. No one likes to go to job, but it has to be done to bring food on the table, to pay the bills, to pay the mortgage. That is necessary. But Krishna is saying, give up the desire to enjoy the results of those activities, right? That is kind of a sacrifice. So that what will happen? What will be the result? Krishna says, then one will get elevated to the state of knowledge at least. Just by giving up results, one will start purifying the mind. One will stop thinking about I, me, and mine. How can I enjoy? How can I get pleasure from here, there, everywhere? No. Then one will start becoming self-satisfied. Then one will be able to understand what exactly is Krishna trying to talk about in the Bhagavad Gita. Then one will come to a position where one will actually understand who is Krishna, that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then Krishna says, you cannot give up the results of your activities. Okay, I give you one more option. Cultivate knowledge. That is what we do here on Wednesdays. We take on knowledge, we cultivate knowledge. And it's important that when we take on the knowledge, then we contemplate on it. And then we put it into practice. So Krishna says, cultivate knowledge. And he says, better than knowledge is meditation. And better than meditation is renunciation of fruits of activities. Why? Because this renunciation will bring peace of mind. Then one will be able to really understand, who am I? I am the spirit soul. So knowledge will take one to the stage of meditation. And in Kali Yuga, the best form of meditation recommended by Krishna is mantra meditation. Man means mind, tra means to free the mind. So this Maha Mantra is the chanting of the holy name which frees the mind of all anxieties, of all stress. So this chanting is very, very beneficial. I've been chanting for decades, and it is just amazing how it brings about so much peace of mind. You see, this material world is dukhalayam. It is a place of misery, but this chanting helps us to purify the mind. It is said in the scriptures, Krite yadhyayato Vishnum Tretayam yajato make Dwapare paricharyam Kalau tad Hari Kirtanam. In Kali Yuga, Hari Kirtanam, chanting the holy names of the Supreme Lord, is the process. That is Bhakti Yoga, because when we chant, it is devotional service which is bringing us in direct contact with Krishna. See, so then it is also bringing us in direct contact with the super soul, which is within our heart. So this is a direct method. So why not we just take the direct method? It's like we can touch our nose this way straight away. It's direct. Indirect ways to try to put our hand behind to try to touch the nose. That is an indirect method. This is direct. So chanting is the direct method. Now, from verse number 13 onwards towards the end of the chapter, which is verse number 20, Krishna is giving the symptoms of someone who is very dear to him. Now, first of all, we need to make a choice. Do we want to be dear to Krishna, or we don't want to be dear to him? If we want to be dear to him, here are the symptoms that are listed. What are those? Krishna says someone who is not envious, who is kind friend to all living entities, does not think oneself to be the proprietor, is free from false ego, is equipoised, which means is equal whether there is happiness or distress, success or failure, heat or cold. It doesn't matter what the situation, that person is equipoised, is equal in all circumstances, which means that person is also tolerant and is always satisfied. You see, the problem here in this material world is people are not satisfied. It doesn't matter what they have. They are always looking at, what does my neighbor have that I don't? If my neighbor has X, I got to have it too. No. There is no self-satisfaction. Why? Because there are a lot of expectations. I want this and I want that, and so many desires. And we are running after fulfilling those desires, which are never ending. We fulfill one desire, the second desire is knocking on the door already. Before we have fulfill the second desire, the third desire is knocking on the door. So it's a never-ending circle. We're just going round and round and round. So we need to be satisfied. Those who are not satisfied, their senses are not under control. I'll tell you about, I read about this gentleman. His name is Masaba in Nigeria. And of course, he passed away. He was, I think, 93 years old when he died some time ago. I don't know how many of you have heard about Masaba. You will not believe he got married 107 times. Can you imagine? So difficult to handle one wife. He had 107 wives, out of which 10 he divorced. So he landed up with 97 wives. And he had 187 children. Oh, I have one son and I'm like, that's enough for this lifetime. 187 children. And when he was asked, what are you doing? He said, oh, it is a divine calling. In other words, God has asked me to do that. You think so? Did God ask him to get married 107 times? Have so many children? No self-control. But here Krishna is saying that someone who is very dear to me is one who is self-controlled. And that is why regulative principles help us to control our senses, engaging them in devotional service with determination. And Krishna says mind and intelligence both are fixed on him. All these qualities that we heard just now, they are a symptom of someone who's performing pure devotional service. These are the transcendental qualities of a devotee. He's equipoised. It's so difficult, right? Whenever there is some distress, then there is frustration, there's disturbance, whether it is with the body or the mind, it's a disease or whatever it may be, the mind gets so disturbed. But here Krishna is teaching us that we must learn to be titikshasva, tolerant, right? Matra sparshastu kantaya shitoshana sukha dukkadaha. Agama paino nityastams titikshasva bharata. He's asking Arjuna, please become titikshasva, tolerant, because happiness and distress, they are like summer and winter seasons, they come and go. Right? Similarly, happiness and distress comes and goes. So one needs to be equipoised. One has to go above the bodily concept. Be satisfied in all circumstances. Whatever we are receiving in this life, whether it is happiness or distress, we learned in chapter 3, it's because of our past karma. We have heard this. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So whatever seeds we have sown, that is what is fructifying now. If I sow the seeds of lemon, I will not get mangoes out of that plant. No, I will only get lemons. So based on our past activities, in this life right now, we are facing happiness or distress. So we have to be satisfied because it is our own actions that are reaping now. So if we follow the process given in the Bhagavad Gita and, not over endeavor, try, I want this and I want that. No, be self-satisfied. And if we fix our mind on the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, then it will not be very difficult to control the senses. And best way is with determination. You see, anything that we do in life has to be done with determination. Now, for instance, I, tell my son, I want to start a business and can you help me financially? He says, sure. And he puts in the finances and I don't really care much. I don't go, I'm not really working hard to make the business work. I'm not putting in the time and effort. There is no determination. I'm, the attitude is whatever. What's going to happen? All those funds are going to be lost. The business is going to go down. There has to be determination in whatever we do. If I want to learn software, I have to have that determination to go all the way through and get the knowledge and get the experience and work on it. Like, for instance, when my son was very young, he wanted to learn to play the violin. So we bought him a violin. In those days, decades ago, violin was very expensive. I don't know how expensive it is now, but in India, it was very expensive. We bought him the violin. He played it for 2-3 days and then finished. Where is the determination, right? All that money is lost because there is no interest. So similarly in Bhakti Yoga also, there has to be determination. It's like, yes, I'm interested in this Bhakti Yoga and I want to follow it. And when there's determination, then Krishna says, Ye yatham mam prapadyante tam statheva bhajami. As one surrenders unto me, I reward them accordingly. So when he sees we are sincerely endeavoring to understand Bhakti Yoga, then he helps us by giving us mercy. Now, there are more qualities. That is, no one is put in difficulty. That person is very dear to me. You see, that we behave ourselves in such a way that no one is put into difficulty. No one gets disturbed by us. And person is free from anxiety and fear. Krishna says that person is very dear to me. Now, not to put anyone in difficulty means we have to be very kind. which means we have to perform austerity of speech, depending on how we speak, how we behave, because we can really bring disturbance to someone else. If we yell, if we raise our voice, if we use the wrong words, naturally we are going to disturb the other person. So austerity of speech is that we do not put others in anxiety. You see? So then one can say that, yes, I am progressing spiritually. So, Krishna says, yes, there are some more symptoms of someone who is very dear to me, is, someone who is not fearful, doesn't feel dejected, right? It does not feel sorry, is not envious of others, is not dependent on ordinary course of activities, is pure. And that purity comes by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. He's an expert. He's free from all pains. He's not striving for results. I want this and I want that. No, not at all. Why? Because such a person who's dear to Krishna is very satisfied with whatever comes to him, whether it is happiness or distress, based on his past karma. So this is what Krishna is explaining, that, one has to be an expert. Now, what does it mean that such a person has to be an expert? It means that person knows the goal of life, is convinced that Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna, is convinced that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Bhagavad Gita is the way to reaching the goal of life, which is breaking the cycle of birth and death and going back to the spiritual world, which is Goloka Vrindavan. So person who is dear to Krishna, Krishna says that person understands what the instructions are given in the Bhagavad Gita. What does it mean, does not feel pain? It means is not worried about designations, like, okay, I want to be the CEO of the company, or I want to be the manager. No, is not worried about designations, is just trying to work to the best of his or her ability and giving up the results of those activities. We learned a lot about this karma in chapter 3 and 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, so I don't want to repeat it again and again. But then again, towards the end of the chapter, Krishna gives some more symptoms. There's a lot to digest today. I know if you have the time, you read this chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita again, over and over again, so that you can understand these symptoms. He says, such a person who's very dear to me neither rejoices nor grieves, does not lament or desire, and, is neither feeling happy or distress, is very equipoised, is not worried about material gain or material loss, is not striving for only material things, no, and is equal to all. Very, very important. But how can we develop all these qualities in us? First important point is association. Let me give you an example. If I start associating with someone who smokes, who's a chain smoker, who smokes all the time, I don't smoke and I don't like to smoke. But if I continue to associate with someone who's smoking all the time, I will eventually develop a desire to start smoking. Now, if I start associating with someone who is learning the Bhagavad Gita or teaching the Bhagavad Gita or reading the Bhagavad Gita, then eventually I will develop a desire to know the Bhagavad Gita. So association plays a very important part, because we are known by the company we keep, because that association affects our consciousness. Now, Krishna says that someone who is dear to me is silent. Does that mean we don't say anything? No. What he's saying is such a person does not engage in nonsense talk. Something that has no sense, doesn't make any sense, is not useful. No. But uses that time in chanting. So then Krishna says such a person is very dear to me. See, so these are some of the symptoms, that Krishna is explaining in this chapter, where, it is actually, he's giving us knowledge so that we can follow in his footsteps. We can try to, cultivate these qualities in us so that we also become very dear to him. Once we start acquiring them, then we will come to that pure stage, which is required to enter into the spiritual kingdom. Now, the very last verse of this chapter, number 20, is Krishna saying, who is very, very dear to me. Like 2 times very, very. Up till now it was very. Now it is 2 times very, very dear. He says, those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service. What does it mean? This means whatever he has explained so far in this chapter, all these verses. He says, those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service, they completely engage in devotional service with full faith, making me the supreme goal. Such a person is very, very dear to me. Now you see, we have 86,400 seconds in one day. In 24 hours, we have 86,400 seconds. Let us think, how many of those seconds are we engaged in devotional service? How many of those seconds are we chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra? How many? That will give us an indication how close or how far are we from our goal. So in this chapter, Krishna is giving us the process how we can approach him. What are the symptoms of someone who is accepted by Krishna in this? So who is better? First, we also learned in the beginning, someone who is engaged in personalism or impersonalism. And that was the answer Krishna gave to Arjuna's question, where he very clearly, explained that there is no doubt that devotional service to personality of Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead, that means personalism is better process for self-realization than impersonalism. So with good association, we can definitely develop these qualities and come to that pure stage of devotional service. But of course, guidance is necessary, guru is necessary. So, but we can at least take the first step. For those of you who haven't, for those of you who have taken this first step, please continue on chanting the holy names of the Supreme Lord. I am going to I know some of you have joined for the first time. So for those who have joined for the first time, I have posted some of the links if you're interested. But towards the end is the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. If we can chant that on daily basis, that'll be wonderful. It'll help us in putting Bhagavad Gita into practice. So I'll just chant a few times to give you an idea how to chant this holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So you see, it's very, very simple. And it's my very humble request to please chant on a daily basis so that we can, attain peace of mind. So I'm going to stop here now. If anyone has any questions or comments.